Okay, so for this breakdown, I want to share what I believe is a little bit of a different perspective, a little bit more unique perspective on team fight breakdowns, and a perspective that I think is useful. And I haven't seen it really. I haven't seen much discussions and much talk about these things. So, with that said, I'm gonna try to keep this video short. I'm not gonna go too in depth into the game or the the fight itself. I just want to focus on a few key things that I see happen often, and like I said, I don't see much talk about these things. So for this purpose, I'm going to use this example from T1 and Hanwha Life. This is going to be a dragon fight. It's a pretty kind of simple fight. There's really nothing too unique about it, and that's kind of the point. So with that said, the first thing I do when I try to break down a fight or look at a fight is I want to look at the orientation and direction of the fight right before it breaks out. So the way you do this is you look at the positioning of both teams as two teams made of 5 people, as opposed to trying to look at the individual players and what they're doing, or trying to look at every player, because you have 10 players, so you have realistically 10 different perspectives on the fight that you can look at. But what I do is I look at the teams, how are they positioned as two teams relative to each other. So in this case, I'm just going to draw these lines here. It's kind of simple. You can see they're kind of mirroring each other, not so much in the distribution of players, but in their positioning. They're positioned along the river, right in front of each other, so you can clearly see the fight is going to happen across the river. The direction of the fight is going to be across the river, no matter who engages in this situation. And a different situation would be if T1 was coming from the mid lane into the river. Then they would probably be positioned more like this, and Hanwha Life would be positioned more like this in front of the dragon, trying to take the objective, and then you would have to fight along the river as opposed to across the river. But because in our example, T1 is actually coming from the jungle and they're coming across the river, that's how you get the fight. And also that's kind of how Hanwha Life position as well, because if T1 was coming from the jungle and Hanwha was still kind of committing to this dragon from here, then you would have this, and then again they would rotate and kind of end up mirroring each other usually. But again, let's get back to the actual example, and let me play this through a little bit. You're going to see On is going to get this engage on multiple people, well, at least at first, and he's actually going to use all of his abilities and be able to get the flash out from the Varus. Now, the obvious issue with this engage is there's no follow-up, right? While On is pretty far ahead in this game, and On is a pretty good champion, he's still not able to one-shot the Varus here and mitigate the fact that he has a flash. So it's kind of obvious that this engage is not that good because there's no follow-up. Now, if we go back, I'm actually not going to play the video back, but I'm going to draw these lines again. It's kind of easy to know when there's not going to be follow-up and why there is no follow-up in here. The first issue is, you do have the Ezreal. You can see him on the minimap. He's actually a little bit lagging behind in this fight. But also the other issue is that the other damage dealer and the other person that can have significant and impactful follow-up in this situation is on the other side of the team relative to the players of T1. So you have the engage coming from here, and your follow-up is way on the other side. And then you have to take actually a longer path if they wanted to follow up your engage. And so if we were to look at this example, if we mirror this, and instead the engage was coming towards the follow-up, in front of the follow-up, then the follow-up will be the one taking the shorter route, which is obviously better. Now, in this case, you don't want to engage on the Maokai here, so I'm not saying that Ornn should have engaged on the Maokai. I'm just saying that if we look at this as the bad example, then we can kind of extrapolate that the good example would be the opposite situation. So that's how you can look at how you want to position your engage relative to your follow-up, because usually follow-up lags behind anyway, because the engage happens first and then you get the follow-up. And if you want to have efficient engage, and if you want to have a better chance to actually get a kill and not have to worry about your opponent flashing out, you do want to have as little lag as possible between the engage and the follow-up. And good teams, coordinated teams, are better at it, and obviously worse teams are worse at it. I guess that's not really saying much, but again, that's the point with this engage. Now, the other thing about this engage is, if we look at the positioning now after this engage, all we end up having is, so these pink lines, I guess, are the positioning after the engage. And you can see that not much changed. You're in the same position, just slightly different orientation. So we just rotated this fight. The reason we just rotated this fight is because Varus and the rest of Hanwha were able to actually get away from this engage. So Varus was able to flash away, Kai'Sa was just able to walk away, Thresh here was able to walk away, and also Jarvan, who was not a target of the engage, was just able to move to the side of this engage. So all we ended up achieving by using our Ornn ultimate, committing to the engage, using all of the Ornn abilities, we just get the flash out from Varus and we just rotate the fight. And if anything, now the follow-up and our damage dealers are even further behind, further away from the priority targets in this situation. So if I just let this play through, you actually see that T1 is going to end up winning this fight, and you can see Ornn survives for a very long time, and he almost dies. He doesn't even die, and Hanwha kind of try and kill him, commit to it, and end up losing 3 people and losing the fight. Now, you can say that this fight was won because T1 was pretty far ahead, and Ornn is a pretty good champion, and that's why T1 was able to win the fight. But I can also say that Hanwha Life made a pretty big mistake, and a mistake that I see happen often. And if we go back to right after the engage, right after the flash, to the position that we were talking about, which was the just kind of the rotated orientation here, the issue here is you can see Jarvan is going to go into the Ornn that used his abilities. So Ornn used his ultimate, used all of his abilities, is a tank, and just used his engage. And you have Jarvan going onto him. You have Maokai here kind of collapsing onto the engage as well, walking in front of Azir, taking damage. He's also going to take the Nautilus ultimate with him and bring it to the team. And then you're going to kind of collapse this this position that you have. You're going to collapse it, and you're going to do this, and then stay in front of T1 and have no access to their priority targets, to the targets that you want to actually take out. You can see both Azir and Ezreal are completely full HP, completely safe, and they haven't really used any abilities except the Ezreal who used this ultimate. So for no apparent reason, they kind of collapsed onto the engage, and that happens often. Now, the thing that I think you should do this here, the first thing is, we talked about this orientation. You know that this is the Ornn. Ornn is going to engage. I don't think this is, this should have surprised Hanwha Life, this engage. And so what you should do when you are able to actually get away from the engage, if this is the engage, and you're able to rotate around it and move away from it to the side of the engage, well, usually behind the engage it would be the follow-up and the priority targets, right? Because the front line, let's say, relatively speaking, is going to be engaging, and that means behind them is going to be the follow-up. Now, in this case, the follow-up is not exactly behind them, and maybe it's even further behind because, like I said, Ezreal here is lagging behind, but they're still relatively behind the engage. And you have Maokai here, we have Jarvan. Let me just try and remove a little bit of this. You have Maokai, you have Jarvan, you have Kai'Sa, who was able to move back into here and has flash, has ultimate. Jarvan has flash, his ultimate is coming up in a few seconds. Maokai has flash, he uses his ultimate a little bit early, a little bit too quick. But even besides that, they all have flash, and you have Azir here, and you have the front line and kind of the control players and the engage from T1 are going to be moving into here. So if we pause this here, I have to redraw all this, but you have Maokai, you have Jarvan, you have Kai'Sa. Kai'Sa can literally just walk around if she's understanding that this engage is coming and that she doesn't need to focus on the engage rather than on the follow-up, she can use all this time to actually walk around, not even use her ultimate. And you can have Jarvan and Maokai just stay here. They're completely safe at this point. And you can see here Kai'Sa is focusing the engage that's coming in. But you could have this from Hanwha Life. I believe she can use her ultimate. I'm not sure if the range is enough. I'm sorry, enough here, but she still has flash, so she can flash over the wall if she was moving into here earlier and moving away from the engage, as opposed to move from the engage and then go back and try to put damage down on the Ornn who already used all his abilities in this fight. And this kind of happens often, and this is kind of my thing that I wanted to show with this fight. And you can see it here, I think in this, this is the third game, same series. If you look at the Sylas here, he does the same thing. The Rakan engages over the wall here, and if you look at the Sylas, he's going to, for some reason, collapse here onto the engage and give up all this space that he kind of owned, and he's going to give up all this space to Azir here, who's going to walk in and kind of cause all kinds of issue for Hanwha Life, while Sylas is not really going to be able to push through all these people and really be effective. So again, they do kind of the same thing here. Also another thing, you can kind of say the same thing about Ezreal, who is eing away from the engage directly, the same direction as the engage is coming. He can E away to the side of the engage as opposed to the same direction that the engage is coming. And then he also throws his abilities at the Rakan, who already used his abilities and is a support player anyway, and he's not threatening you in any way. But I think he's obviously using his abilities because that's the way he E'd. So he only is kind of enraged and only has an angle on him. But if he E'd away in one of these side angles, I think it would be easier and more likely that he E's away this way, because obviously it's a little bit more open. Then he would have a different angle on the fight that he might throw Qs at and just be able to observe the way the fight is going to progress. But you can see I'm going to let this play through. Sylas especially collapses here and then gives all this space to Azir, who is able to really impact this, and obviously the rest of T1 is able to push through this engage, because it doesn't matter if you focus the first person that's engaging. That's not what you want to focus on. You want to focus on the follow-up, and that's kind of the thing that I wanted to talk about in this video. Hopefully you find it interesting. I'm gonna end it here because it's already gotten too long for what it is. So yeah, thanks for watching.